you put it underneath, you can start pounding it that way. And the saw just comes right out, right? Hey, it's Greg here with Outdoors on the Cheap, and today I'm going to deal with a tree that's in the way of one of my trails in the woods. So it's a tree that tipped over, it's not rotten, and it's fetched up on another tree over there. So trees like this are a bit of a pain to cut because you start sawing them, and as the tree loses its strength, it actually bites down on the saw, and you can't operate the saw anymore. So I'm going to show you a neat little trick how to deal with that. But number one, I would avoid using an axe. I mean, if that's all you got, you know, you can use it, I suppose. But the risk, you know, when you're cutting with an axe, your follow through should go into the ground. Any follow through in this situation, it's going to go into me, or into my face, or there's all kinds of things that can go wrong here. It's not impossible. I could do it. You know, someone bet me $100, right? I could do it. You just in a situation like this, especially this is only 5 inches in diameter, you just take very light. If you have to use an axe, I would just take very light, you know, light chunks out of it, sort of thing, right? And none of this sort of stuff. That's a recipe for disaster, right? But just little sort of, just chip away at it. No power, almost just using the weight of the axe, right? Then that way you can stay in control. If you're winding up like that, that's a recipe for disaster. All right, anyway, we're going to talk about using the saw. Today here I've got a Silky Gumboy I'm going to use to cut this. These are, in my opinion, the best folding saw you can have in the woods. This is the Gumboy. I've got another one called the Big Boy, which is a little bit longer. For what these things cost and what they can do, they're absolutely worth the money. I've worked out a deal with the Newfoundland Knife Company. If you want to buy a Gumboy, or actually anything, they have a large assortment of knives, of course. But the main thing they sell that I'm sort of recommending is these Selkies. They cut on the pole, and if you've never used a saw that cuts on the pole before, it's the way to go. If you use my coupon code, I'll put it up on the screen, you get 10% off. If you buy over $100 worth of gear, they'll give you free shipping. So not a bad deal. I'll put all the information up on the screen if you're interested in that. Good Christmas present for somebody else. Great thing to use if you're in the woods. Great thing to have with you, right? You can solve a lot of problems with one of these. Anyway, so you start, and this isn't a rotten tree, so I mean the wood's perfectly live. You start working away, and eventually, I don't care what kind of saw you're using, it starts becoming very difficult to pull the saw because the tree's binded up around the saw. So what do you do in that situation? If you got a buddy, get your buddy to lift up on it while you cut. If you're reasonably strong, you can, you know, do something like that, but it's not the best. If you have another tree, let's see if I got something here. This isn't the right size, but with the saw, before you do all this, you can cut a very stout tree and cut it so that it's the right length underneath where you're planning to do your cut. So basically on this side of it, right? And what you can do is, see if I can, so what you do is you just stick it underneath the tree and you start banging it this way. And it's literally a jack post, it lifts it up. By lifting that up, it'll free your saw a little bit. Right, so you cut another tree, you drive it down, let me show you, okay, because I'm not making any sense here at all. Hang on a sec. Alright, so this is the sort of thing carpenters do all the time. You're basically using what's called a jack post. So you get it so that it's, you know, almost the same height, right? you would do this before you start cutting, especially if you've got a bow saw. Right, if you've got a bow saw, you can't leave it in like this, it'll tip, and you could there's a risk you could break the blade. Right, so you've got a bow saw, you've got to have some sort of stick to hold it because they tip over. Yeah, it's one advantage of using a saw like this. Anyway, drive that in a bit. Okay, then you put it underneath and you start pounding it that way. And the saw just comes right out. Right? So now, ideally you want to get that right underneath your cut. Okay? And you do that before you start to cut. And assuming this stays in place, now you can cut it, and it won't give up on you. Okay, so that's one solution. The other alternative here is to use some sort of paracord. You're going to have a reasonably strong rope, but paracord's a good one. You know, 550 breaking strength, 200 working strength. You don't need to put 200 pounds pressure onto this, so all I'm doing is just attaching a lark's head around that. Now you got to have a tree nearby to attach it to, and make sure your rope doesn't pass underneath the bite of the saw, of course. Right? But we can put it around a tree like this, nice and high, and just start cranking on it. Right? See how the saw just popped out? Right, so now I can add a little tension to that using the right knot. Always good to have rope in your kit. You solve so many problems with it. Okay, so now I've got that attached. I know it's the right tension because the saw came out. Right, so now I can go back to work. Now I can go back to work. Done, right? Disconnect this. Right, that's out of the way. Another trick is the Spanish windlass. But that's the general idea. You use a jack post or you use rope to hoist it up with pulleys or with the correct knot or with the Spanish windlass. I suppose I could do a more elaborate video explaining all those techniques in more detail, but the idea here was just to give the general principle and how to get by using just a saw, as opposed to using an axe, which is extremely dangerous for that sort of situation. You can get by with it. You can do anything with an axe. But a saw is a lot easier, takes less energy, and usually safer. Anyway, removing a tipped tree that's fetched up on something safely using a rope or a jack post. You know, the jack post often is the most expedient. If you can find something that's reasonably strong kicking around, never a problem where I am. And you just cut it to the right length, either using an axe or using a saw, so you can just, you know, tap it in, take a little bit of the weight off the thing, and finish your cut. Put it right underneath where you're cutting. That's the easiest solution. Alternatively, use rope with either with a pulley or with a trucker's hitch or a Spanish windlass. Or, I mean, all I did there was just I just used the trunk of the tree like a pulley, right? I was holding the rope and I was pulling on the rope at the same time like that. And there was enough friction to hold the rope in place, but also to allow the tree to act kind of like a pulley, right? So I was kind of using brute strength for that. If you had a heavier tree, that wouldn't work. You'd have to use probably a Spanish windlass. Right? You've got the Spanish windlass. You've got the rope doubled up, and you put something through it and you just start twisting it, right? And as you're twisting the rope, it makes the rope shorter and shorter and shorter. Anyway, that's the general idea. So I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Until next time, enjoy the outdoors on the cheap. Thanks for watching.